Hello and welcome to Reports from Arbroath. Today we are in Swansea, 414 miles from Arbroath, and we're in the company of cricketing greatness. We're here at the historic venue of the St Helens ground in Swansea with a man who between 1957 and 1983 scored more than 43,000 runs in first-class unlimited overs cricket, 43,206 to be precise, many of them on bowler-friendly uncovered wickets, and most of them in an era when all the world's top bowlers played regularly in county cricket. In 645 first-class matches, 610 of them for Glamorgan, he scored 56 centuries and passed 50 on another 194 occasions. He also took 3 wickets. Alongside his excellence as an opening batter, he was a brilliant colleague, advisor and mentor to countless teammates over the years. I'm delighted that we are joined here at St Helens, where he played some of his finest innings, by Alan Jones. Alan, a very warm welcome. That is a career in which you must take so much pride.
Indeed, yes. You know, when I first started playing for Glamorgan, I never thought that I would be playing for Glamorgan for that length of time. But I must admit, we've had some wonderful years when I was playing. I remember coming down to St Helens for the first time to watch the West Indies playing Everton weeks. And it wasn't only a rare occasion that we visited St Helens because life was so different in those days. And then I was fortunate enough to be taken on the Glamorgan staff and a summer contract. And I happened to be down at St Helens watching Glamorgan playing Australia in 1953. I believe it's 53. And Glamorgan had 2 injuries, and the second injury was Bernard Hedges, and we only had 12 players. So I was watching the game from the crowd, and that Will Fuller came on the mic saying that, the assistant secretary came on, Phil Thomas came on the mic and said, if there's any of the young Glamorgan players on the ground watching, could he come to the dressing room? So I went to the dressing room at St Helens, and I was told that I've got to go out and field. I went out to field against Australia. I was only 17 years of age. Went out to field against Australia, and my boyhood hero, Neil Harvey, was batting. And the first ball that I picked up on a first-class cricket field was hit by Neil Harvey. Oh. It was incredible, really, that I should be fielding against one of my heroes, Neil Harvey.
And you turned up that day just to watch?
I turned up that day just to watch. I was on the Glamorgan staff as a 17-year-old. And Glamorgan only had 12 players, as I say, at St Helens. They had an injury. Jimmy Presley came off, and then Bernard Hedges came off. And I never had any kit.
I was going to ask that.
So I had to borrow Bernard Hedges' kit. Fortunately, Bernard and I were about the same size. And that's how I went on to the Glamorgan St Helens cricket ground for the very first time, wearing Bernard Hedges' kit.
So you must have got home as a 15-year-old boy that day and thought, did that really happen?
I really couldn't believe it, that it had happened to me, going down to watch Glamorgan playing Australia of all teams at St Helens, and being called on to the cricket field to field instead of Bernard Hedges, wearing Bernard Hedges' kit. It was quite unreal.
It wasn't too long after that you were in the Glamorgan system, was it? Your first class debut in 1957, and how soon did you think, yes, this could be my career, this could be my life?
I was picked to play for Glamorgan against Hampshire at Swansea earlier on that season, and we never bowled a ball. It rained for 3 days. And then the next game was against Notts at Ebervale. And I went up to Ebervale, and Will Fuller said that we're not playing you at Ebervale, because he didn't think at that time that the wicket at Ebervale was good enough. So my first game for Glamorgan was against Gloucester at Bristol. And I got naught in the first innings, and I got 11 in the second innings. And at that time, I thought that I would never ever make it as a professional cricketer, failing in that game. But it was through hard work. Obviously, I had some ability. It was through hard work and dedication, and attending cricket nets at Neath through the coaching of Phil Clift, that I managed to come through, and I must admit, enjoyed a wonderful career playing this professional game.
As you say, it started at Bristol against Gloucestershire. Your home debut followed against Middlesex here, and it was here at St Helens that you really were to enjoy some great times.
Yes, St Helens has always been a favourite ground of mine. I was fortunate enough to play against Australia, the two wins that we had against Australia, 64 and 68. And in 68, I remember very well, Don Shepherd was captain on that day, and I got 99. Don't ask me about the shot I played to get out, but it was disappointing to get out at 99, but it's a game that I will always remember, because it was another great win for Glamorgan. We had a very good side. Glamorgan was a good side in those days, and we were a very accurate bowling attack. A lot of good batsmen in the side, including Majid Khan and Tony Lewis and Peter Walker. And it was a very strong side. And did in the 60s, 60, 68, 69 and 70, there were 3 very good years for Glamorgan. We won the championship in 69, and 1968, I think we finished second or third, and then third or second in 1970. So there were 3 very, very good years. And the games that we had here in the championship year, we played, they stick out in your mind really, because so much happened at St Helens. It was a very happy ground for me to play at, but it was never an easy wicket to play on. It always helped the spinners, and we had a very good bowling attack in spinners like Jim Presley and Don Shepherd and Peter Walker. And in 1969, winning the championship, I remember playing against Middlesex. You mentioned Middlesex as one of my first games at St Helens. We played Middlesex here in the championship year, and I got out late on. And I remember going into the dressing room, and Tony Lewis, the captain, and this is very true what I'm telling you, saying that I think we've lost the game now, but I also think that we've lost the championship as well. And Malcolm Nass, sitting in the corner, putting his pads on, and Nashi said to Tony Lewis, the captain, "Captain, we haven't lost it yet." And Nashi went out to bat with Ivion, and they put on 60 or 70 to win the game. And we won that game. And then a couple of weeks later, we played Essex at St Helens, and we needed 1 wicket, and they needed two or three runs to win the game. And then we run out Ray East at the very last ball. A throw in from John Lever. John Lever, is it John Lever? Yeah, John Lever. Run out by Tony Lewis, by Ozzie Weekly. and Ozzy wasn't the greatest fielder in the world. But it was a great throw, and it was well taken by Ivian, and we ran John Lever out to win that game. And they had two very memorable games at St Helens.
And of course, you got big runs here against the West Indies in '66, 161 not out.
Probably one of my better knocks at St Helens. When you play against the genuine quick bowlers like Wes Hall and Charlie Griffiths, you don't really look forward to playing against them. But if you do manage to get some runs, and I was fortunate to get 160 odd against them that day, it was very pleasing and very satisfying. And I think it's one of my better knocks at St Helens. They were two great fast bowlers. To see them off with the new ball and the second new ball was something very special as far as I'm concerned.
You did play against many great bowlers, didn't you, on some difficult wickets. Are there any bowlers that you look back on and think, oh, my word, that was tough?
I think one of the best bowlers that I ever played against was Brian Statham, Lancashire. Great bowler and a proper gentleman on the field of play. I thought Fred Truman was a great bowler as well. The difference between Truman and Statham, Fred told you that he was great, and Statham was a very modest cricketer. But they were both great bowlers. The other great bowlers, of course, I was fortunate to play against Malcolm Marshall, Andy Roberts. I played against Michael Holding. And they were quick bowlers. They were genuinely quick bowlers. And we never had any no helmets or anything in those days. So you had to be very good technically to play all these players. The game has changed an awful lot now. It's always very satisfying to play against great fast bowlers and get runs. But I also felt very happy when I played against people like Titmus, Derek Underwood, Gifford. There were lots of very great spinners around through my career. And, to get 100 against one of those great spinners on a turning wicket, and especially at St Helens here, it was very pleasing.
Facing Derek Underwood on an uncovered wicket, which is slightly damp, strikes me as...
Oh, yeah. Derek Underwood was a magnificent bowler. He was length, always good length, turned it quite a lot. But he also bowled it at a quicker pace to all the other spinners that he played against. He was very similar to our Don Shepherd, who was a magnificent bowler, and carried Glamorgan's bowling for a number of years. And Underwood was the left-arm Don Shepherd, as far as I'm concerned. Two great bowlers.
You're very generous to all these great bowlers, and the great bowlers they were, but you scored a lot of runs against them. So talk about your batting a little bit and your mindset.
I was fortunate, well, not fortunate. I worked hard at my game to get to where I did. I had good concentration. I remember going to play for Western Australia in 1963, and I opened the batting for an Australian 11 against South Africa with Peter Pollock and Graham Pollock and Jackie McLew and Trevor Goddard. That was a very good South African side. And I opened the batting with Bobby Simpson. And I asked Bobby Simpson, while we were out there batting, if we could have a chat, if we could have a little talk about batting at the end of the game. And he said, we'll have a chat tonight, he said, after after we played here. So we played that game, and he and I had a drink together, and we spoke for about half an hour to an hour. And I wanted to know how he approached his knock in the morning when he got to the ground, and how did he approach his game. And he said, Alan, every game I play, I'm going to bat up here in my mind. I'm going to bat all day. I'm going to bat session, 3 sessions. And I work it out, he said, if I score 40 in the first session, I'm happy. I'm not out at lunch. I'm 40 in the second session, 80 not out at tea. And then the bowlers see you coming out after tea as well. They don't really fancy bowling too much at you. And if I get another 40, 120 in a day, that is my day. And for every game that I play, that is my mindset. I am going to bat. And ever since I spoke to Bobby Simpson that day, that's the way I approach my game. Whenever I got to St. Helens or the Savoy Gardens, in my mind, I'm going to bat all day. There are days that I used to come down here, and I said to myself, I'm going to bat all day. And I got a first ball. And as Bobby Simpson said, that happens. But the main thing about it, you have that first ball, you forget about it. Next day is another day. And that's how you approach your game.
It's probably a unique thing about professional cricket, isn't it? And particularly as a batsman, like you say, it can all be over in 30 seconds and you're sitting on your...
Yeah, absolutely. And the main thing about the game is that you go in, you bat, you get 100, you enjoy it when people... I used to walk up the steps here, it was brilliant. Scoring 100 at St. Helens, walking up the steps and the crowd clapping you in. Absolutely brilliant. It's a terrific feeling. But then there's another day when you get the first bowler, and that is a long walk up to the dressing room, I can promise you. But that happens. The main thing about a batter, and I think it applies to a cricketer, professional cricketer, you forget about it. You enjoy the 100 that day and that evening, and as soon as you go home, forget about it, because tomorrow you could get a first bowler. Yeah. And the same thing is when you get that first bowler, you forget about that as well. And you got to say to yourself, that's gone, and I'm going to get runs in my next game. And that's how I approach the game, and that's what I've tried to pass on to young players when I've been coaching them. I'll never forget, Peter Walker was a great cricketer. But when I've batted with Peter, if he played and missed, he worried about it. He said, yeah, this wasn't right or that wasn't right. And I used to go down and say, Peter, that's gone. That's gone. It's the next ball that's going to get you. And that's the main thing about cricket. Whatever you do, and we all played. I played and missed plenty of times. But it never worried me. What I said to myself, hey, I've got to get better for the next ball. And you try and play the next ball in the middle.
I guess when you're facing people of the calibre of Malcolm Marshall and Brian Statham, you're going to get the occasional one that goes past your outside.
Oh, yes. You've got to accept that. I think the main thing about opening the batting, and I opened the batting for about 20 odd years, you're going to be hit. There's no possible way that you can play for as long as I played and not being hit. But that is something that you've got to accept. You've got to accept that. And you've got to try and make sure that you don't get hit too often. I used to go back into the dressing room and Wilf would say, if I got hit, Wilf would say to him, why didn't you use your bat? And that was the reply.
Because no helmets in those days, of course, as well. Just a cloth cap.
cap.
Yeah,
Yeah, just a cap.
against these very fast guys.
Oh, yeah. It was, but the thing is, the game was different in those days. Your batters coming down at St. Helens, and I did for the beginning of my career. I never wore a cap. And then later on, when I got my Glamorgan cap, I used a cap, and I wore a cap all the time, and I always wore a cap. Towards the end of my career, I remember playing down here against the West Indies in a Sunday league game. And this is what made me wear the helmet. And Jeffrey Holmes, who played for us, I'd been out batting against Michael Holding. And Jeffrey, very innocent, Jeffrey Holmes walked out to bat at St. Helens with no helmet. And Michael Holding's very word to one of the other players, and the batsman the other side to Jeffrey heard him saying it. He said, "Who the heck does he think he is?" And as soon as Jeffrey got in to bat and Holding came on the ball, he let him have it. And I thought, because I played until I was 44, I thought my last 3 or 4 years, I said, I'm going to wear a helmet. And that was the reason why.
And everybody does these days.
And everybody says it now, yeah. The game was completely different. But I think technically they're not as good now as they were, not because I played, they're not as good as all players were then because of the helmet. I mean, there are players now that will take on quick bowlers hooking, and they're not good enough to play it. You see them trying to hook, and they get the top edge, and because of the bats they've got, they will fly for 6. But it wouldn't happen in those days. Your bats weren't as thick and heavy as what they are today. And then you had to have, technically, you had to be a good player to stick around in those days without being hit.
Well, you were a good player technically and stuck around a lot, and it eventually came to the England selectors' recognition in 1970 against the rest of the world. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Yes, I think I was injured. I got injured against Essex, and I came back home. That Friday afternoon, I remember being selected to play for England. It was on the radio, and I remember Keith Fletcher coming into the dressing room to shake my hands and saying, hey, good luck, it's about time. And I said thanks, but I came home. I got injured my knee. The next game was against Worcester at Neath, and I didn't play in that game. And then I went up to play in the test match at Lord's. But I think nerves played a big part in my game that day. Mike Proctor did me twice in the test match. And I've played against Mike Proctor loads and loads of times, and I've got runs against him. I've scored quite a few runs against him. I played with him out in Natal, South Africa. And he was a good bowler, Procky, but he did me twice. Not the best shots I'd ever played, but I think nerves played a big part in my test match.
It was an unusual series, wasn't it? Arranged very short notice because of the South Africans. What was the atmosphere like? Was England against the rest of the world is a strange concept, isn't it? Was it fun?
Actually, the players were great, both sides, because the South African Test series was called off. It picked up on the rest of the world side, and they said at the time, because Sobers, I remember Gary Sobers asking, if we play in the World 11 against England, are we going to be awarded full caps? And they said, yes, you will be awarded full England caps. And that's how it was on day. When I got to Lord's, I was presented with my England cap, 2 sweaters and a tie. And you're very proud of that. That is a big occasion for any young player. But I mean, I enjoyed the Test match. It's something that you aim for as a young player. First of all, you get under the Glamorgan books. You want to play for Glamorgan for a long time. You aim for a Glamorgan cap, and you get capped, and then you're going to aim to try and play for England one day. I managed to do that. I wish I had had a better Test match, or maybe if they'd picked me for another Test match later on, I would have been a different player. But I know deep down myself, I was a much better player than I was on that Test debut.
Well, the evidence is there, 43,000 runs of how good a player you are. Does part of you think you might have got another call for England at another point?
Well, you always think that. I would have said that I was ready to play for England about 5 years before that, and that was my best period as a player. I got into my 30s when I was selected. I was 32, I think, when I played for England then. I was still playing well. I was playing well. But you always hope that one day they'll pick you again. But it never happened, and that never really got me down. And when I came back to Glamorgan, I said, well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep on playing like I have been playing, get as many runs as I can, and if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, I've had a good life.
Well, there's some great moments still lay ahead, not least captaining your side in the Lord's final in 1980.
Yes, that's a big step. I'm a senior professional, and Majid Khan retired, finished playing, and I had the captaincy. And we played here against Leicester, semi-final of the Gillette Cup. Always a very difficult side to play, especially with Illingworth in the team as captain. And we beat Leicester here to go to the final at all outdoors. Sorry. And that was a great win. Good performance by all the players. And then it was a little bit disappointed when we got to Lords and lost in the final there. It was a super day. Everybody enjoyed it. We nearly had the whole of Wales up there, to be honest. And there were daffodils all over the ground. And a day that we'll always remember.
And 3 years later came another day that you'll remember, I would imagine. At the age of 41, career best 204 at Basingstoke. You're still obviously playing very well.
Actually, Hampshire, I did quite well against Hampshire as a side. And yes, at Basingstoke, I got 204 not out against Hampshire. Always very pleasing that when you get 100, it's pleasing, but when you get 200, it's a long time at the wicket and innings that I will always remember. And it's strangely that you mentioned that the one person that was at the ground that day at Basingstoke, he was working down in Hampshire, was Bernard Hedges. He was in the dressing room. And
you weren't wearing his trousers again.
Yeah, amazing. Yes, to see that 200 was a lovely day, actually.
And it was against Hampshire that your career finally concluded, I believe, in 1983, and quite an illustrious chap to get you out in your last innings, Mr. Marshall.
Actually, I remember the ball. It was a good ball. I think I got 4, didn't I?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, he bowled me a ball on my leg stump, which I played a lovely shot through mid-wicket for 4. And you felt really, really good after that. And then he bowled me one that pitched just outside off stump and nipped back in between bat and pad, and he clean bowled me. Great. I was a great bowler. Absolute great bowler. Never really looked quick when you faced him, but he had genuine pace and brilliant control on the ball. One of the best bowlers that I ever played. He and Andy Roberts. Andy Roberts played for Hampshire as well before Malcolm. 2 great bowlers. I remember speaking to Andy Roberts. I never really spoke much to fast bowlers. I didn't like them. But I remember speaking to Andy Roberts in Leicester. And I asked him, when I first played against Andy when he was in Antigua, I was a guest with a side from Bristol, Mendipacon. Went out and we played against Andy in Antigua. And he was a young 19-year-old then. And in the side as well was Viv. Never seen Viv before. And Andy bowled at me, and he bowled quick, but he sprayed it. It was all over the place. And I spoke to him at Leicester some 10 years later, 15 years later. And I said, when I first played against you, you're great, you're genuine pace, good bowler. But I didn't mind playing you because you sprayed it. You gave me wide balls so I could play. He said, now you're a great bowler. You make me play. You've got your line. You've got your length. You make me play all the time. And to score off you now, I have to take a chance.
Yeah.
And he said, what's made you a great bowler? And he said, Alan, I bowl for an hour every day. At one stump, I put a target down on the length and hitting that stump. But the one thing I do, I take my proper run-up every ball, and I make sure that I'm not running on the wicket, that I bowl for an hour every day. Practice.
Another great cricketer from the Caribbean, of course, was Mr. Sobers, who you have mentioned already, and you've mentioned Swansea. And Mr. Sobers and Swansea will always be associated, I think, with one day in 1968, and you were present there.
There's no doubt he's the greatest I've ever played against, Sobers. And he was a magnificent player, great bowler, a swing bowler, quick bowler. He could bowl a quick bouncer as quick as Wes or Charlie. But good control, good orthodox left arm spin, and back of the hand, he could bowl it. That when he got that 6 sixes at St. Helens here, I remember a very good friend of mine, Alan Rees, who was fielding at the covers, great fielder, Alan. And everybody talked about Sobers as 6 sixes. But he played some shots that day through the offside on the ground. They were absolutely magnificent. And I remember talking to Alan after, because Gary got about 70 in quick time. And talking on it, I tell you what, they were great shots, the 6s. He said, do you know what? Some of his shots on the ground through the covers were better shots. And he was such a great player. I remember playing, I mentioned 1963 to you, playing out in Western Australia. Gary was in South Australia then. And we played against one another in Perth. And at the end of the day, they come in, we have a drink, we have a chat about the game. We'd scored 461, Western Australia. They were 119 for 6 on Saturday night. This is God's truth. And I was talking to Gary here of the day, what about the day, and what are you doing tonight? And he said to me, I'm going across the road to the Trots, because he's a big gambler, Gary. He said, oh, I think we're going to come across there as well. We'll probably see you there. He said, yes, oh, I'll be there. So anyway, we went across, but we never saw Gary. I was coming back from Nets in the morning. Gary was going over to Nets. He was not out on Saturday night, 16, and Barry Jarman was not out, 12. They were the two at the wicket. He said that Gary went over. I said, as he went over to Nets, I said, how did it go Saturday night? He said, Alan, I had a terrible night. I lost $150. $150 in 1963 was a lot of money. It's all right, he said, I'm going to make it back today. I had no idea what he meant. So anyway, I came back. Gary went over for a net. He came out to bat with Barry Jarman. He got 195. Jarman got 100. And that evening, came into the dressing room. I said, what did you mean this morning that you're going to make it back $150? Every run I get over 50, they give me $1 a run. South Australia. He was a fiver short.
That is a truth, a great incentive. That's a lovely story. Talking of actually go in the bar after play, I think county cricket used to be a gathering of players.
Oh, yeah.
What about that day after Gary had hit 6 sixes? And then I think Glamorgan went into bat for a little while, didn't they, that day? Did you meet after the play and talk about the day?
Oh,
That's quite an interesting day.
The dressing room, the club at St. Helens was some very, very special. You walked up the steps, and at the end of the evening, Gary, he got changed. He came up to the bar, and obviously everybody wanted to talk to him at the bar about his 6 sixes and what have you. And he had time to talk to not just the players, but some of the members as well. And they remember that. And I think that's what's gone missing from the game today. You can come off the field, go into the bar for an hour afterwards. You don't have to drink a lot. You can drink soft drinks. But you meet your members, you meet the members, you have a chat with the members. The players go home, the members go home happy. They've had a chat with so-and-so today. And that's what St. Helens was like. All the players enjoyed going after the club just for an hour after the game, before the away players used to go back to their hotel and we'd go home. But it was a wonderful atmosphere, to play cricket in those days.
And just finally, of course, you've got lots of affection for St. Helens. And of course, this may be the end of an era this year. Who knows what the future holds for this place?
Well, yes, indeed. It's very sad. When I came down here this morning, when I had a look at the ground, because I hadn't been here for quite a long time, because Glamorgan haven't played here for six years.
19.
Yeah, 6 years since we played here. And I don't think I've been inside the ground since then. And to see it this morning was a bit heartbreaking, really, because I've had so many great days down at St. Helens. We won some great games down here. And of course, as I say, some wonderful knocks and a very enjoyable ground to play on. There was a wonderful feeling when you came down to play at St. Helens. We used to park our car up on the hill, and walking down to St. Helens, coming down the hill, was a wonderful sight in those days, because you'd have the crowd queuing up to get into the ground. And everybody would say, good morning, Alan, or whoever it was. Good morning. It's a lovely feeling walking into the St. Helens Pavilion and everybody saying hello, good morning to you. And the sun shining, and you look down over St. Helens. In those days, you used to see the Mumbles train, and then the sea, and it is just a lovely ground, wonderful ground. And the funny thing is, whenever I speak to players from other counties, and I've always said to them, you know, we played against you at Cardiff, played you at Vale, Neath, Swansea. Where's your favourite ground when you play? And everybody, all the counties that I've spoken to, said St. Helens any day. Although the wicket didn't help quick bowlers as much as they helped the spinners at St. Helens, they all enjoyed playing down at St. Helens.
Just going off on a tangent, I mean, you mentioned bowlers. Your 3 first-class wickets, from where did you sneak them in?
They're important wickets, them. Actually, my first wicket was in Australia, Western Australia. I got a chap out playing with South Australia, Sam Trimble, caught it slip. And then we played Worcester at Worcester, and Ron Headley was batting, and he got 100. He was 140 odd, not out. And Tony Lewis was looking for a declaration, so he asked me to come on and bowl. And my first ball to Ron Headley, I used to bowl a bit of off spin. It pitched and turned, and he got an edge, and he was caught behind by Ivian for 140 odd. And I said to Tony Lewis then, you see, you should have asked me much sooner to come on of a bowl. But that's the one I remember. I remember Ron Headley wicket very, very well.
Alan, it's been an absolute joy to talk to you. You mentioned a number of occasions during this conversation you were fortunate to do this and you were fortunate to do that. I hope you also realise how much pleasure you've given as a cricketer and a batsman, as a mentor, you know, and I hope you take lots and lots of pride in that as well.
The only thing I can say is that I've really enjoyed playing the game. I've met some wonderful people. I've had the opportunity to go out and play in Australia, play in South Africa for Northern Transvaal and Natal. Wonderful times, great players. But there was no place like Swansea to play, and I've enjoyed every minute that I've played. And the sad thing for me at the moment is that we're not going to be playing cricket at Swansea, and I think it's going to affect the Glamorgan County Cricket Club, because when you look back at the years where most of the Glamorgan players have come from, and most of the Glamorgan players have come from the West. And unfortunately now, over the last 6 years, when I look at Glamorgan Academy players, there are not many people from the West. And I think that is because we're not playing cricket at St. Helens. It's going to be a big loss to Welsh cricket and to Glamorgan cricket that we haven't got a St. Helens anymore.
Well, there's a wrinkle or two in the plot ahead, hopefully. So let's hope that something can change that. But Alan, it's been an absolute joy to talk to you, and many thanks.